In honor of the grand solar eclipse taking place, I want to pay homage to a Masonic magician. This is a great book by Philippa Falk and Robert L. Cooper, The Masonic Magician. Sorry, it's reversed. The Masonic Magician, Philippa Falk. Excellent book. It tells you a lot. They go in depth on Count Cagliostro and his Egyptian rite. Now, I'm sure many of you know who Count Cagliostro is, so I'm not going to go into that at this point. Now, the Egyptian rite, I'm not using their book because I don't have their permission to use it, so I didn't want to get into a copyright infringement. And the entire Egyptian rite. Now, what is a rite? It's a ritual. Is it a magic ritual? Possibly. It could be a more mental, spiritual enlightenment. In the Masonic world, now, the Freemasons that you know of, they have nothing to do with this ritual today. So Count Cagliostro was trying to introduce it into Freemasonry from his studies in the occult and to the Egyptian knowledge of the ancient Egyptians. This is what he was trying to impart to modern Freemasons. This is a way of, Masonic ritual is a way of encapsulating ideas so that you have them in your mind. I've talked about a lot about mind control and things of that sort, hypnosis. You can look around at all the people who are infested with terrible ideas, who are drug addicted, violence addicted. So the ritual is a way of mentally cleansing yourself of negative ideas. You say, well, I could do that with prayer. Yes, you can, and you should. But for some of us, we take it, we add a different dimension to it. And this is what we would call the rituals. Now, again, modern Freemasonry in this is a different discussion. The structure you're going to hear is Masonic in nature, but it's not a performed Masonic performance done today. Now, appropriately enough, tomorrow is the great solar eclipse. Appropriate enough, there's a thunderstorm coming behind me. Appropriately enough, I have a staff given to me by an adept. And when I'm gone, this staff will have to go to someone else. And again, I guess your question is this magic I'm seeing? This is not magic. I would not show you magic because to me, showing people magic who are not trained is highly dangerous and highly, it's not responsible. Not everyone should be into this. Most people should go to church, synagogue, mosque. That's where they belong, and they're going to be happiest there. But for some of us, we want to explore the deeper dimensions. And believe me, these deeper dimensions have a lot of danger in them. And if you do not have a sturdy mind, or you're prone to problems or addictions or mental disturbances, they're only going to be magnified by hundreds of times if you step into this realm. You say, well, then why are you doing this? Well, this is more tame situation. But in light of the current environment that the world is in, the United States is divided. There's wars and rumors of war, as our Lord Jesus Christ has taught us. I've thought a cleansing ritual using Count Cagliostro's methodology and putting it here in this spot. And, 1,000 years from now, that ritual will have been performed here. No matter what else happens, that ritual would have been formed here. It's planting a seed. It's planting a vessel of hope. It's planting a hope chest for the future. That's what this is. So I hope you take it in the spirit. I mean it. I'm not trying to convert you. That's not my point. But I'm not going to do the whole ritual, because if I did, we'd be here all night. So I'm going to read from the Colorado Freemasons archive, and we're going to go to the Catechism of a Master of the Egyptian Lodge. And this is the question and answer you'll hear a lot of times in these types of situations. Okay. Whence come you? From the interior of the temple. What did you see in the temple? A dove, very beautiful and very favored of God. A sanctuary blazing with light, a tableau revealing allegorically the greatest secrets of nature, and a brilliant star over the heart of each of the venerables. What does the star show? A beautiful rose around which there are two inscriptions, the one consisting of these words, I believe in the rose, and the other of these, primal matter. What does the rose signify? That is an emblem of the primary and precious matter, of which there is a constant mention in all the writings of our doctrine, and which is found in the hands of all the elected. What is the use and what are the duties of the dove? They consist of serving as the intermediary between the angels of the Lord and the elected, to give knowledge to those latter of the divine will, and finally to convince them of the obvious existence and great power of God. What does the sanctuary contain? The sacred name of God, placed in the middle of a blazing star. Give me, I pray you, an explanation of the tableau. What does the phoenix signify? That a true Mason will be reborn from the ashes, that it will be possible to renew and rejuvenate himself at will, like that bird. So it is certain that it can be said, El et reveting plamat meus. What is the significance of time and of the master who clips his wings? Since a good Mason has lately come to snip the wings of time, his life is endless. What can be said about the broken, destroyed instruments of torture? That a Mason having attained the degree of power, death no longer has any fear for him. What is the significance of the overturned hourglass? For the immortal man, the measure of time becomes useless. What does a sight of the interior of the temple mean to you? The most sublime knowledge. How do you know that? Because there was communicated to me a portion of the power which God of his good will granted our great founder, and though it permitted me to regenerate a man who was lost. How were you occupied in that interior, in glorifying God, and accomplishing those duties laid down by our great founder? What are those duties? They are entirely spiritual, and none other than those which will gain admission into the temple of God, where one occupies himself in the same manner that Solomon once did in the presence of all people, while he consecrated the temple which he erected to the Eternal. What do we find in the middle of the temple of Solomon? The true tabernacle, the resting place of innocence. At the sound of invocation, the Eternal manifested his power in favoring the place by the presence of all the angels, archangels, seraphims, and cherubims. How did Solomon commence his duty? He descended from his throne. He laid his hands, with his fingers extended on the head of the dove, and stuck it with the sacred sword, and made a true sacrifice which he offered to the Supreme Being. He carried it into the tabernacle and offered it up to his prayers and invocations in a manner so clear that all the people understood. His duty and his confidence were so perfect because he showed evidence of those graces spread among all men. Did our Grand Master always practice and follow the same method? Always. However, all the duties were performed according to his constitutions and ordinances, and were constantly crowned with great success. But it is necessary to conform exactly and scrupulously to the commandments which are prescribed in the catechisms, because without that, one runs the risk of incurring that which once to the ministers of the temple at Jerusalem after the death of Solomon. Those ministers combined their ideas and built the Tower of Babel. It resulted in errors without number, schisms as well as idolatry, which the man filled with pride sees again today in his dismal surroundings. What is the significance of the sacred pentagon made of paper according to the art? The Pentagon is the fruit of the great work of moral regeneration through the retreat of 40 days, which all the truly elected of God have made. During that time, one divides his 24 hours as follows. 6 hours are employed in reflection and rest. 3 hours are consecrated to prayer and sacrifice to the Eternal. 3 times 3 or 9 are intended for sacred manners. The last 6 are reserved for conversing together and recording the lost powers, both physical and moral. What does the Pentagon represent? Enoch, Elias, and Moses, which we know the last of the exodus from Egypt, and after he had made the journey with pain and fatigue, carried with him a number of things chosen by the voices of the angel of the Lord, took them to the top of Mount Sinai. There he made a retreat of 40 days, and while there he made the perfect sacred Pentagon, written and engraved with the names and signs of the 7 archangels, as well as the sacred writing which God gave him. And as Moses retired to the mount, he ordered Aaron to remain at the foot and guard against intrusion of the people of Israel, either because of pride or curiosity. He carried the sacred Pentagon to confirm the power of the Eternal, to afford knowledge of truth and give proof of the great power accorded to man. There were also many other elected favor of God and favorite of Moses, of whom I would like to talk to you, but I am bound to tell you that having accomplished the great feat, there is nothing more to be done. What do you mean by nothing more to be done? As soon as a man possesses the sacred Pentagon, he has no need to give up the triangular cubical stone, nor change the stones into bread. Man aspires constantly to have perfect repose, to possibly obtain immortality, and say of himself, Vigo sum quae sum. How are the 6 hours of reflection and repose used? To permit each elect to enjoy himself as he may, for meditation, for the refreshing of physical self by sleep, or by cessation of mental activity, all labor suspended during these 6 hours. What happens during the 3 hours concentrated to the sacrifice of the eternal? One prays, one adores, and one entreats for the physical and the moral to be cleansed of all impurities. The Catechism of the Apprentice requires that prayer, as well as sacred invocation, the commandment given to the archangels, to be used to obtain knowledge of the true words and signs belonging to the art. How are the 3 times 3 or 9 hours allotted to the sacred works occupied? These 9 hours, divided into 3 parts, are used to prepare the virgin paper as well as the other articles which are to be consecrated during these days, that they may be used for the presentation of the 33rd day in a room newly built for that great purpose. For what are the last 6 hours employed? They are reserved for recreation, for conferences, for preparation, according to the ancient methods, of the different colors which are necessary each day, and finally to dispose, fulfill, and satisfy our needs. What sort of place to be chosen for this important retreat? One prefers a very high place, and if possible, a mountain uninhabited, well hidden from the eyes of mortals, on which is to build a pavilion according to the proper and convenient proportions. And one should tell no one of the day in which he will leave. It would be necessary to assemble in advance all the articles necessary, which are the instruments of the art according to Moses, the furniture, the utensils, the vestments, etc. What do you mean by the instruments of the art? There are different objects, such as the ceremonial cloth and others. The ceremonial cloth is of yellow silk, which you will recognize the importance and necessity, which you are instructed in the manner of which it will be necessary to concentrate the pavilion and instrument of the art. What is the pavilion called? Zion. To teach it was the Mount of Zion that God revealed himself to man. I beg of you to give me the details of the pavilion, including its dimensions. The pavilion must be built expressly for that purpose and destroyed when that purpose has been filled. It is 3 stories high. The chamber on the 3rd floor should be a perfect square, 18 feet in height as well as length and breadth. The 4 windows placed in the middle of each side should be oval, 3 feet high and 4 feet wide. There is to be but one door for entrance to this room, and it should be built in such a manner that the person alone may open or close at will. This room should be entirely white without any color. The 2nd chamber or cell in the middle story has no windows. It should be perfectly round and a size to contain 13 beds, solely for the repose of the 12 elects and of the chief. There should be a lamp in the middle, and there should be only furniture such as absolutely necessary. When the 3rd chamber is to be destroyed, the 2nd chamber will be called Arat, to teach that the ark rested on the mountain, that perfect repose is destined for the elect of God. The 1st or lower chamber should be of the size suitable to serve as refractory. It should be surrounded by 3 closets, of which 2 are to contain the provisions and other necessary articles, which the 3rd is to contain the instruments and utensils which are required for the operation or purposes of the retreat. It should be built in place, if possible, where there is running water, because once the pavilion is entered, no one may leave before 40 days have passed. What is the intention of the great operation? That your soul may be exalted, that your heart may be filled with love for the eternal, and double the knowledge which our great founder received from the last mystery, which is permitted to be revealed to you. After the 33rd day, and also before the 40th of the Supreme Being, will be according to this assistance the ineffable favor revealing through the 7 archangels the seals and signs of those immortal beings, which are engraved on each of the virgin paper. The operation having been consummated and complete, the man who had the pleasure of being numbered among the elect attains the acme of glory and happiness. He becomes master and chief worker without the help of any mortal. His spirit is filled with divine fire. His body becomes also like that of a most innocent child. His perceptions boundless, his power immense. He will contribute to the propagation of truth in all the world, and he finally will have a perfect knowledge of the grand class, and he will finally, as well as the good and evil of the past, present, and future. The elect who has made that retreat, receiving for himself the sacred and unusual pentagon, established by the 7 seals and by the 7 signs of the 7 primitive angels, he receives in addition 7 other pentagons which should be present to those 7 persons, men or women, whom he should prefer and desire to interest further. Each of these 7 pentagons should contain on the virgin paper the seal and sign of one of the 7 original angels. But whereas the elect will be able to correspond and communicate with all the 7 original angels, the possessors of one of the secondary pentagons will not be able to see or communicate with any except the angel whose seal and sign is shown on the pentagon which he has given. Each of these 7 persons should enjoy to the utmost the prerogative of being able to operate and work as a matter and command of the 7 archangels and all the hierarchies, but under the restrictions of which mention is to be made in the first catechism, and subject to the intent of the 3 philosophies. The perfect elect enjoys the first power, but does not command the immortal except in the name of God. But the person whom has favored by secondary pentagon may make use only of the second, which is limited, and he cannot act and command except in the name of his master, or by his will of which he is unaware, as well as that which is detailed in the apprentice catechism. Will you climax your kindness now by telling me how the physical regeneration is accomplished? By a retreat similar to 40 days, one retires during this time with a friend. One conforms to the regimen prescribed by the founder. One takes 3 pinches or 3 grains of the primary matter and will find perfect regeneration. What will be the result of his action? The old man will disappear and the new recommence his course. The regeneration will renew him with the same success for another 50 years, the same as which pleased the Eternal to give him richly. Is there any example of similar regeneration? Certainly. The scripture gives you one about Moses. It tells you how Moses, after the retreat of 40 days and 40 nights on Mount Sinai to form the sacred Pentagon, returned a second time to the mountain and remained there again for 40 days and 40 more nights. The scriptures in like manner informed that after the second absence, Moses returned with a force so brilliant and refulgent with light that the people could not bear the sight, and he covered his head with a veil. The mystery of that enigma is that in the second retreat, Moses secluded himself with his friend Hur for physical regeneration, and because at his return his face was so rejuvenated and so changed, he had to hide the phenomena from the people. He would not speak or communicate to them again without covering his head with a veil. And that is the end of the first catechism that Count Cagliostro had in his Egyptian rite. The rite goes on, a couple notes they have here. It's not clear whether the dove is a man or a woman who is a member of the adoptive rite. It appears to be of no importance, as Cagliostro mentioned several places, as the dove is purified according to ritual and mates by acting as master. So what do you make of all that? Well, this Count Cagliostro is taking you through the temple rituals of King Solomon. He's taken you through the Bible of Moses on Mount Sinai. If you remember when Moses came down, his face was so resplendent with light and brightness, people could not bear to look upon him. So Moses had to veil himself because Moses has stood in the presence of the Lord. And since he has stood in the presence of the Lord, he had the divine radiance upon him. There's also a section in there you heard about the primal matter. That is the alchemy that Cagliostro and other alchemists of that time were looking for. So is this literal? Do people do this? I would say no. This is a mental exercise. The building of the house and all this, in my opinion, this is a mind palace. You're creating a mind palace in your mind of the structure, and you're going through this purification ritual. Excuse me. You're going through this purification ritual, 40 days and 40 nights, like the Lord Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights. And of course, Satan came and tempted him and said, if the Lord has told you that, if you try to strike your foot against the stones, angels will hold you up. You could command these stones to be bread. And Jesus says, man does not live by bread alone. He lives by the word of God. So the purification rituals, Cagliostro in this Egyptian rite is also talking about he's pointing out that Jesus went through a purification ritual for 40 days and 40 nights, like Moses went through a purification ritual for 40 days and 40 nights. Several times Moses did. And then in both cases, Moses could stand in the presence of God. Of course, Jesus is an emanation of the eternal mind as well. He is God. He is eternal mind as well. So I think this is giving the adept, the alchemist, the magician, the thinker, a way of purification of the mind in a world that's full of, of imperfection, of evil, of corruption, of lust, of envy. This is how you purify your mind. I'm not telling you to do this. I'm simply doing this as a point in time, because I thought with the solar eclipse coming, this would be a good time to have that in the world so that people could hear it now and for many generations. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed that. That's kind of a somewhat of a Masonic history from Cagliostro was a Freemason. He was an alchemist. He was many things. He might have been a charlatan, as we know, but this book talks a lot about him. This is Philippa Fox, The Life and Death of Count Cagliostro and His Egyptian Rite. And I've given you a piece of the Egyptian Rite there, and you can see that it's fascinating what Cagliostro was trying to do. Trying to purify people, trying to understand how to go through these rituals. And in closing, many people try these rituals now. I've complained bitterly about people like Joe Rogan or Aaron Rodgers talking about taking mescaline and ayahuasca and these other drugs. That's not necessary. You need a purification methodology. That's up to you. You pick. It could be reading the Bible for 40 days. It could be purifying yourself through exercise or proper diet, or reading the Bible, or reading your scriptures, however you want to do it. But you do not need to use these worldly methodologies. They don't work. And I think that's what Cagliostro was showing you in his ritual. He's showing you how to look at the scriptures slightly differently, like how did Moses interact with God, how Jesus went into the wilderness, how John the Baptist was in the wilderness. This purification concept is what makes people closer to God. Enjoy your solar eclipse. Talk to you soon.